Elena was the kind of student who always sat in the back of the classroom. She never tried to stand out or draw attention to herself. While most of her classmates chatted and laughed during breaks, she usually sat quietly by the window, watching the schoolyard with calm, distant eyes. Her teachers often said she was polite and well-behaved, but few could say they really knew her. At her small-town high school, music class was a regular part of the schedule. Most students didn't take it very seriously. It was a chance to relax after math and science. The teacher, Mr. Daniels, was a cheerful man who loved music more than anything else. He believed that everyone had some kind of talent waiting to be discovered. So when he announced that every student would have to take part in a small piano recital at the end of the term, he expected excitement. But Elena didn't feel excited at all. When Mr. Daniels made the announcement, the classroom buzzed with noise. Some students groaned, others clapped, and a few already began choosing songs to play. Elena just stared down at her notebook. The word recital made her stomach twist. After class, while everyone rushed out for lunch, she stayed behind. She slowly walked up to Mr. Daniels' desk and said softly, "Sir, I don't think I can perform." He looked up, smiling kindly. "Oh, come on, Elena, you can play something simple. It's just for fun, not a big competition." She shook her head. "I really can't. I don't know how to play." Mr. Daniels frowned slightly. "You don't? Well, that's all right. I can help you learn something small. Maybe Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or Ode to Joy. Everyone's playing something." Elena wanted to protest again, but his tone was firm yet friendly. She didn't want to argue. She nodded quietly, even though her chest felt heavy. That afternoon, she walked home slower than usual. Her house was only a few blocks away, a small old place that still held the scent of wood and dust. As she entered, she heard the faint creak of the floorboards. The living room was quiet except for a covered piano standing in the corner. A white sheet lay over it like a blanket, untouched for years. Elena stood there for a moment, looking at it. Her throat tightened. It had belonged to her mother. When Elena was little, the piano was the heart of their home. Her mother would sit there for hours, fingers moving gracefully over the keys. Sometimes she would play cheerful songs while cooking dinner, or soft lullabies at night to help Elena sleep. Back then, music was everywhere, bright, warm, alive. But that was before everything changed. Her mother had died in a car accident 5 years ago. The memory was still sharp, even though time had passed. After the funeral, Elena had covered the piano herself. She couldn't bear to hear its sound anymore. Each note reminded her of the woman she had lost. The laughter that once filled the house, the lessons they shared. From that day, she promised herself never to play again. Now, standing before the covered piano, Elena felt an old ache in her chest. She brushed her fingers lightly over the dusty fabric. The thought of touching those keys again terrified her. She turned away quickly and went to her room. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Mr. Daniels said. She imagined standing on stage with everyone staring at her. Her hands would shake, her heart would pound. She couldn't let that happen. But if she refused to play, she might fail the class. Her father always told her to do her best in school. She couldn't disappoint him too. The next day, she arrived early to class. Mr. Daniels was already there, setting out sheet music and cleaning the piano keys with a soft cloth. "Good morning, Elena," he said brightly. "I thought we could start today. Don't worry, it's easy once you try." Elena hesitated, then took a seat on the wooden bench. The piano looked newer than the one at home, shinier, almost inviting. Still, her hands trembled. Mr. Daniels placed a beginner's sheet in front of her. "Let's just try a simple scale. Start with C." She pressed one key, then another. The sound filled the room, soft, clean, and unfamiliar. Her chest tightened again. "Good," he said gently. "Now go up to G." She obeyed, her fingers stiff and hesitant. After a few minutes, he smiled. "See, you're not bad at all. I think you've done this before." Elena froze. "No," she said quickly. "I haven't." He looked at her curiously but didn't press. "All right. Just keep practicing. You'll do fine." Over the next few weeks, she practiced in class but rarely spoke. Mr. Daniels noticed her quietness, but he thought she was just shy. He didn't know that every sound of the piano brought back flashes of her mother. Her gentle smile, the way she'd hum softly as she played, the sound of laughter echoing through the house. Sometimes, after everyone left, Elena would stay back to help close the classroom. She often found herself glancing at the piano, her mind drifting back to those childhood evenings. She remembered sitting beside her mother, legs too short to reach the pedals, laughing as her mother guided her small fingers across the keys. She remembered the day she first played a full song on her own. Her mother had clapped proudly, saying, "You have a gift, my dear. Never stop playing." But she had stopped. One afternoon, Mr. Daniels approached her while she was organizing music sheets. "Elena, have you decided what piece you'll play for the recital?" She looked startled. "No, sir. I'm still learning the basics," he chuckled. "You've got time, but you should choose soon. The recital is in 2 weeks." Her stomach sank. 2 weeks. She wanted to say she couldn't do it, that she wasn't ready, but the words wouldn't come. That evening, she sat alone in her room thinking about what to do. She opened her school notebook, intending to write an excuse for Mr. Daniels, something about being sick or unprepared. But as she sat there, she heard faint music. It wasn't coming from outside or the TV. It was in her memory. Her mother's melody, her eyes filled with tears. She closed the notebook and buried her face in her hands. The following day, she tried once again to talk to Mr. Daniels. "Sir, please," she said quietly during break time. "Can I skip the recital? I really don't want to play." Mr. Daniels looked surprised. "Why not? You're doing fine. I can see potential in you." "I just can't," she whispered. He sighed. "Elena, I understand that performing can be scary, but this is part of your grade. Everyone has to do it. You'll regret it if you don't try." Her shoulders slumped. She knew there was no way out. That night, she sat in the living room again, staring at the covered piano. The sheet was no longer white. It had turned pale gray from dust. Her father had never moved it. He said it reminded him of her mother. Slowly, she walked closer. Her fingers reached for the edge of the cloth. She hesitated, then pulled it off. Dust filled the air, making her cough lightly. The piano looked just as she remembered, smooth, elegant, with faint scratches on the side from when she was small. She sat down carefully. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished surface above the keys. For a long moment, she just sat there, silent. Then, almost without thinking, she pressed a single note. The sound rang softly through the quiet room. Her eyes stung with tears. She pressed another note, then another. The melody came back to her hands like a ghost, gentle, sad, but familiar. She stopped halfway, unable to continue. Her father entered the room just then, holding a cup of tea. He froze when he saw her sitting there. "Elena," he said softly. She looked up, wiping her eyes quickly. "I'm sorry, He smiled faintly and set the cup down. "It's all right. Your mother would be happy to hear it again." Elena looked back at the piano, her fingers trembling. "I don't think I can." "Yes, you can," her father said gently. "She'd want you to." For the first time in years, Elena felt torn between fear and longing. She wanted to keep the memories buried, but part of her missed the music, missed that feeling of connection. That night, she dreamed of her mother sitting at the piano, playing the same soft tune she used to play when Elena was a child. In the dream, her mother turned to her and smiled. "Play for me," she said. When Elena woke up, her heart was pounding. At school the next morning, she walked into the music room with a strange calmness. Mr. Daniels greeted her cheerfully and told her to practice. She nodded, taking her place at the piano. Her fingers rested lightly on the keys, and for a brief second she closed her eyes. The first note she played sounded clear and strong. Mr. Daniels turned from his desk, surprised. Something in her touch was different that day, more confident, more alive. He didn't know that something deep inside her had just begun to wake up. And though Elena didn't realize it yet, this small beginning would soon change everything. The days after that quiet morning practice began to feel a little different for Elena. She still came to class early, but now, instead of sitting quietly at her desk, she walked straight to the piano. Something had shifted inside her. It wasn't excitement exactly, more like curiosity. Every time her fingers touched the keys, she felt something familiar stirring, like a small flame that had been asleep for years. Mr. Daniels noticed it almost immediately. One morning he smiled and said, "You seem more comfortable now. I told you you'd enjoy it once you started." Elena didn't answer right away. She just smiled politely and kept playing. Inside, her feelings were mixed. She didn't want to enjoy it too much. Music used to mean everything to her, and losing it had hurt too much. She was afraid that letting it back in would bring the pain back too. But even so, every note she played seemed to speak to her in a language no one else could hear. At home, her father watched her with quiet pride. He didn't push her or ask her to play, but sometimes he would pause by the living room door just to listen. The sound of the piano filled the house again, soft and unsure at first, but slowly growing stronger. It was as if the walls themselves remembered. One Saturday afternoon, Elena sat at the piano for hours. She told herself she was only practicing for school, but soon she found her fingers wandering beyond the simple song Mr. Daniels had given her. A few notes from an old melody slipped out, one her mother used to play. Her hands hesitated, but then she continued. The tune was like a whisper from the past, both comforting and sad. When she finished, she realized she had tears on her cheeks. Later that evening, her father came in holding a framed photograph. It was of her mother smiling beside the same piano. She would have been proud of you, he said softly. You sound just like her. Elena stared at the photo. I'm not like her, she said. She was special. Her father sat down beside her. You have the same gift, you know. You just hide it, she looked away. It's not a gift if it hurts, he didn't answer. He just placed the photo on top of the piano and quietly left the room. The next day at school, Mr. Daniels handed out new pieces of sheet music. He told the class that each student would perform one song at the recital. Some students were nervous, others excited. One boy bragged that he'd learned a song from a video game. A girl said she'd perform a pop song she loved. When it was Elena's turn, she just shrugged. I haven't decided yet. Mr. Daniels smiled. Well, I'm sure you'll pick something beautiful. You have a good ear for melody. That made a few students turn to look at her. She could feel their eyes and her face turned red. She hated being the center of attention. During lunch, she sat alone in the courtyard nibbling at her sandwich. A classmate named Lily came and sat beside her. Hey, she said. I didn't know you could play piano. You're actually good. Elena smiled shyly. I'm not that good. Yes, you are. I saw you practicing the other day. The teacher couldn't stop smiling. Elena didn't know what to say. Compliments made her uneasy. I just like to play sometimes, she murmured. Lily nodded. Well, I'm nervous for the recital. I wish I had your confidence, Elena laughed quietly. Confidence? I don't have that, Lily grinned. Then you hide it really well. That small conversation stayed in Elena's mind the rest of the day. It felt nice to be seen, not in a showy way, but in a kind one. For the first time, she thought maybe playing music again wasn't something to fear. Maybe it could help her feel connected, not alone. That evening, she returned home and sat at the piano again. She started to play the beginner song for class, but halfway through, her hands drifted toward something else, something her mother used to teach her when she was small. It was a simple waltz, one she had memorized without even trying. The music filled the air softly, like sunlight through old curtains. Her father peeked in from the hallway, smiling. When she finished, she noticed him standing there. I'm sorry, she said quickly. Don't be, he replied. I haven't heard that one in years. I didn't mean to, he shook his head. Keep playing, Elena, it suits you. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about her mother's lessons. She remembered sitting on her lap, learning how to read the little black dots on paper that turned into sound. Her mother used to tap her on the shoulder whenever she played a wrong note, then laugh and say, mistakes are part of the music. Now, years later, Elena could almost hear that same voice again. The following week, Mr. Daniels announced that he would be checking everyone's progress one by one. When it was Elena's turn, she played the short piece she'd been assigned. But halfway through, she accidentally added a few notes that weren't part of the song, notes that made the melody flow more smoothly. Mr. Daniels noticed. That's not in the book, he said, raising an eyebrow. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to change it, he smiled. Don't apologize. That was beautiful. You changed it for the better. She blinked, unsure how to respond. Do you know what that means? He asked. She shook her head. It means you don't just play music, you feel it. That's something no one can teach. Elena didn't answer, but inside, a quiet warmth spread through her. That afternoon, when the class ended, Mr. Daniels stopped her before she left. Elena, he said kindly, have you ever taken lessons before? Her heart skipped. No, she lied. He looked at her thoughtfully. You play like someone who's been trained. You have very natural rhythm and control." She shrugged, pretending not to care. "Maybe I just got lucky." Mr. Daniels smiled faintly. "Maybe." But deep down, he didn't believe that. Over the next several days, the class practiced in small groups. Some struggled, others laughed their way through mistakes. Elena, however, practiced quietly, always lost in her own world. Her movements were graceful, precise, far beyond what a beginner should be able to do. The other students started noticing. One boy whispered, "I think she's secretly a pro." Another girl said, "She's just pretending to be shy so she can surprise everyone at the recital." Elena heard their teasing but ignored it. They didn't understand. This wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about facing something she had buried for years. A few days before the recital, Mr. Daniels asked her again what piece she would perform. She hesitated, staring at the piano keys. "I don't know yet," she said quietly. He smiled gently. "Choose something that means something to you. Music speaks best when it comes from the heart." That night she sat at her mother's piano again. The house was silent, and the moonlight slipped through the curtains, falling softly across the keys. She ran her fingers along them, lost in thought. What did she want to play? She thought of her mother, of the songs that filled her childhood, the gentle lullabies, the joyful rhythms, the melodies that once made her dance barefoot in the living room. Her heart ached. Slowly she began to play the same nocturne her mother used to love most. It was delicate and haunting, filled with emotion that words could never express. She didn't look at any sheet music. She remembered every note by heart. As she played, she felt her mother beside her again, just like in the dream. Every sound carried both sadness and comfort. She played until tears blurred her vision. When she finally stopped, she realized her father was standing by the doorway again, quietly wiping his eyes. "Was that your mother's song?" he asked softly. Elena nodded. He walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then that's the one you should play at the recital." She looked up at him, surprised. "I can't, it's too hard." "Too personal." He shook his head. "That's exactly why you should. It's yours now, too." She didn't answer. But later that night, when she lay in bed, she couldn't stop hearing the song in her head, the same melody that had once connected her and her mother so deeply. For the first time in years, Elena didn't feel afraid of it. She felt thankful. The next morning, when she walked into class, she quietly told Mr. Daniels, "I know what I'll play for the recital." He smiled. "Good, what's it called?" She hesitated, then said softly, "It doesn't have a name, but it's something my mother taught me." Mr. Daniels didn't ask anything more. He just nodded respectfully. Somehow he understood that this wasn't just another song. It was a story, a memory, a piece of who she was. And though Elena didn't realize it yet, the recital would soon reveal just how deep that hidden part of her truly went. The day of the recital was getting closer, and the air around the school was filled with both excitement and nervous chatter. Posters hung on the hallway walls with the words "Annual Music Showcase" written in bright letters. Students walked around with sheet music in their hands, humming, practicing and sharing jokes about who might forget their lines first. But Elena felt none of that excitement. Every morning she came to class, sat quietly, and practiced alone. The closer the performance came, the more her stomach twisted with anxiety. Even though she had decided on the piece she would play, the thought of standing in front of so many people made her hands tremble. Mr. Daniels, noticing her unease, tried to reassure her. "You'll be fine, Elena," he said one afternoon as the class packed up. "You have something special, and everyone will see that. Just trust the music." She smiled faintly, but his words didn't calm her. Trusting the music was exactly what scared her. That night at home, she practiced again on her mother's piano. The familiar tune filled the house, the same soft, sorrowful melody her mother had once played. Her father sat in the corner, pretending to read the newspaper, but really listening. When she finished, he looked up and said quietly, "You play with your heart just like she did." Elena glanced at him. "Do you think people will like it?" He smiled. "It doesn't matter if they like it. What matters is that you play it the way it's meant to be played." That answer stuck with her. The next morning at school, the final rehearsal began. All the students gathered in the auditorium. The piano sat under a bright spotlight, polished until it shone. Some students were confident and cheerful, others pale with nerves. The sound of tuning instruments and quiet whispers filled the air. Mr. Daniels stood at the front, clipboard in hand. All right, everyone, we'll run through the performances one by one. Remember, this is just practice. No one's judging you. Elena sat near the back, clutching her sheet music, though she didn't really need it. Her turn was near the end. She watched as each student took the stage, some fumbling, others grinning through mistakes. The room filled with laughter and clapping after every performance. Then it was her turn. Mr. Daniels looked up. Elena, you're next. Her legs felt heavy as she walked toward the piano. The stage lights hit her face, and the audience of classmates looked bigger than she'd imagined. She sat down slowly, hands trembling above the keys. She took a deep breath, trying to remember what her father had said. Play it the way it's meant to be played. But when she pressed the first note, her fingers froze. Her heart raced. The sound echoed too loudly in her ears, and all the confidence she had at home disappeared. She lifted her hands off the piano. I'm sorry, she whispered. I can't. Mr. Daniels stood up. Elena, it's all right. Take your time. She shook her head, blinking back tears. No, I can't do it. The class grew quiet. A few students exchanged awkward glances. One boy whispered, She's chickening out. Elena heard it, and her chest tightened. Mr. Daniels walked up to the stage, his voice calm but firm. Elena, I know you're nervous, but you've practiced hard. You owe it to yourself to try. No one's here to laugh at you. She looked at him, her eyes full of fear. I don't want to, he sighed. If you don't play now, you might not pass the class. I can't make exceptions, even for good students. The room went silent again. Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to scream that she wasn't just scared of the crowd, that playing brought back memories she wasn't ready for. But she couldn't explain that to anyone. They wouldn't understand. She stared at the piano. Her mother's voice echoed faintly in her memory. Mistakes are part of the music. Her hands moved on their own. She pressed the first note again, softly this time. Then another. Then a third. The melody began to form, hesitant at first, but then smoother, more certain. The room fell silent. Her classmates stopped whispering. Even the air seemed to still. Elena forgot about the lights, the people, and the stage. She was no longer in the auditorium. She was back in her living room, sitting beside her mother. Every note carried a piece of her heart. Sadness, love, loss, and healing all mixed together. Mr. Daniels, standing to the side, watched in awe. He had expected a simple tune from a shy student, but what he heard was something completely different. Her playing wasn't just skillful. It was emotional, powerful, and alive. The song built slowly, then flowed into a wave of deep, haunting notes that filled the entire room. The melody rose and fell like a story being told without words. Some students leaned forward, completely caught in the sound. When the last note finally faded, there was no sound for a few seconds, only silence. Then, suddenly, applause filled the air. Mr. Daniels was the first to clap, followed by the rest of the students. Some even stood up. Elena blinked as if waking from a dream. She looked around, confused, her cheeks flushed. Mr. Daniels walked up to her, his voice soft but full of emotion. Elena, where did you learn to play like that? She hesitated, eyes lowering. At home. My mother taught me. He nodded slowly, still amazed. That wasn't just playing, Elena, that was art. You made the piano speak. She gave a small, uncertain smile. I just played what I remembered. Well, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I think you just reminded all of us what music really is. The other students surrounded her, asking questions. How long have you been playing? Was that your own song? You said you didn't know how. Elena didn't know how to answer any of them. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She had just played because she couldn't hold it in anymore. That afternoon, as everyone left, Mr. Daniels stopped her once more. Elena, he said quietly, I didn't know about your mother. I'm sorry if I pushed you too hard. She looked at him surprised. You didn't know? He smiled gently. No, but now I do. And I'm glad you played. You have a gift that shouldn't be hidden. Elena didn't say anything, but a small warmth spread inside her. For the first time in years, someone had seen her not as the quiet girl in the back of the class, but as someone who had something to give. When she got home that evening, her father was waiting in the living room. How did it go? He asked. She smiled softly. I played. He raised his eyebrows. And? They clapped, she said almost shyly. Even the teacher. Her father laughed, the sound full of pride. Of course they did. I told you. When you play from the heart, people feel it. She sat beside him on the couch, leaning her head on his shoulder. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the faint sound of wind outside. Dad, she said after a while, do you think Mom would have been proud? He smiled gently. She already is. That night, Elena went to bed feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't that the pain of losing her mother had disappeared, but for once it felt like she could breathe around it. Over the next few days, word spread quickly around school about her performance. Some students started calling her the piano girl. Even teachers who hadn't been there heard about it. Elena tried not to let the attention get to her, but she couldn't deny that it felt nice to be noticed for something good. Mr. Daniels began giving her more advanced pieces during class, saying she needed a challenge. She accepted them quietly and practiced each one carefully, her fingers finding their rhythm more easily each day. One afternoon, he told her, "You should think about joining the regional music showcase next month. There'll be students from other schools performing." Elena looked startled. Me? He nodded. Yes, you. You're ready. She shook her head quickly. I don't think so. That's too big. He smiled knowingly. That's what you said about the recital. She laughed softly, realizing he was right. As she walked home that day, the sun setting behind the trees, she thought about how far she had come in just a few weeks. Not long ago, she couldn't even look at a piano without feeling pain. Now it had become her way of remembering her mother with love instead of sadness. She paused outside her house and looked at the window where the old piano stood inside. A faint smile touched her lips. Maybe this was just the beginning, and though she didn't know it yet, that single performance at school had already set something powerful in motion, something that would soon reach far beyond the walls of her classroom. After the school recital, life slowly began to change for Elena. What had started as a simple performance for a grade had turned into something much bigger. People who had never noticed her before suddenly wanted to talk to her. Teachers greeted her in the hallway with smiles. Some classmates who used to ignore her now asked questions about her music, about how she learned to play so well. At first, the attention made her uncomfortable. She wasn't used to being the center of anything, but deep down it also made her happy. For so long she had lived quietly, almost invisible. Now people finally saw something in her that she had kept hidden for years. Mr. Daniels, her music teacher, was especially proud. Every day after class he asked if she would stay a few minutes longer to practice. He told her that her talent needed guidance, that with a little training she could go far. One afternoon, as they finished a session, he said, Elena, I've been thinking. There's a regional showcase next month. Students from different schools come to perform. I think you should go. She looked up surprised. Me? But I've never played in front of that many people. He smiled kindly. You said the same thing before the recital, remember? She hesitated. The memory of the recital still played vividly in her mind. The nerves, the fear, and then that strange calmness that came when her fingers found the melody. This is different, she said quietly. I know, he replied. But I believe in you, and I think your mother would have too. His words hit her deeply. She looked away, blinking fast. I'll think about it. That night she sat at the piano in her living room, the same one her mother used to play. The moonlight fell gently across the keys and the house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. She rested her fingers on the piano but didn't play right away. Her father came in quietly, carrying a cup of tea. You're thinking about what the teacher said, aren't you? She nodded. I don't know if I can do it. He placed the cup on the piano and sat beside her. Why not? What if I mess up? What if I'm not as good as people think? Her father chuckled softly. Do you know what your mother used to say when she had to perform? She looked at him. What? She said, the only wrong note is the one you're too afraid to play. Elena smiled faintly. That sounds like her, he nodded. You don't have to be perfect, Elena. You just have to be brave. That night she stayed up late, playing quietly to herself. Every note reminded her of her mother. Every melody a piece of memory stitched into sound. By the time she went to bed, she had already made her decision. The next morning, she told Mr. Daniels she would do it. His face lit up. I knew you would say yes. From that day, her practice sessions became more serious. Mr. Daniels helped her refine her technique, showing her how to control her breathing. how to use silence between notes to make the music more powerful. Sometimes he would just sit and watch as she played, amazed by how naturally her fingers moved across the piano. It wasn't just skill, it was emotion. Every sound she made carried something real. Weeks passed and the day of the regional showcase drew closer. Posters went up around town, and Elena's name appeared among the list of performers. Her classmates wished her luck. Some even said they would come to watch. But as the date approached, her nerves began to grow again. She couldn't sleep the night before the event. Her heart felt heavy with worry. The next morning, her father drove her to the auditorium. It was larger than she had imagined, with tall ceilings and rows of seats that seemed endless. The sound of people tuning instruments echoed through the hall. The smell of polished wood and faint perfume filled the air. As they waited backstage, Mr. Daniels checked the list of performers. "You'll be fourth," he told her. "Remember, take a deep breath before you start. Play like it's just you and the piano." She nodded, gripping her hands tightly. When it was finally her turn, her legs felt like stone. She walked toward the stage, the bright lights blinding her for a moment. The crowd was silent, hundreds of eyes watching. She sat down at the grand piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. For a second, she thought she couldn't do it. Her throat went dry, her palms sweaty. Then she remembered her father's words. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be brave." She pressed the first note. The sound filled the hall, soft and steady. Then came another and another. Slowly, the melody began to bloom, wrapping around the room like a gentle wind. Her fear melted away. It was no longer about the audience, or the competition, or what people thought. It was about her mother. It was about that feeling she used to have as a child. Safe, warm, loved. The more she played, the more the world around her disappeared. Her hands moved effortlessly as if they had a life of their own. The music swelled, then softened, then swelled again, carrying every emotion she had buried for years. When she played the final note, the sound lingered in the air for a few seconds before fading into silence. Then came the applause. Loud, heartfelt, endless. Elena blinked, startled. She looked up and saw people standing, clapping, some even whistling. Mr. Daniels stood at the side of the stage, his eyes shining with pride. Her father, seated near the front, clapped with a wide smile, his eyes wet. She stood, bowed awkwardly, and walked off stage, her hands still trembling. Mr. Daniels met her halfway. "That was incredible," he whispered. "You didn't just play, you made them feel something." Elena smiled weakly. "I was so nervous," he shook his head. "You didn't look it." When the event ended, several people came up to her to compliment her performance. A woman from the organizing committee even asked if she would consider playing at other events. Elena was too shy to answer. She just nodded and thanked them quietly. That evening, when she got home, her father wrapped her in a hug. "You did it," he said proudly. "Your mother would have cried hearing that." Elena laughed softly, brushing away a tear. "I think she did." For the next few days, she couldn't stop thinking about the feeling she had while playing. That strange, peaceful sense of being completely herself. It was something she hadn't felt in a long time. At school, everyone congratulated her. Even students who barely knew her before smiled when they passed her in the hallway. She didn't crave the attention, but she was grateful for it. Mr. Daniels suggested that she start composing her own pieces. "You have something to say through music, Elena," he told her. "Maybe it's time to let the world hear your story." She liked the idea, though she wasn't sure where to start. That weekend, she sat at her piano at home, a blank sheet of paper in front of her. She began to play softly, experimenting with notes, letting her fingers find what her heart wanted to say. Hours passed, but she didn't notice. By the time the sun began to set, she had created something new, a piece that wasn't her mother's but her own. When she finished, she leaned back and smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Her father came into the room, listening quietly. "That's new," he said. She nodded. "I wrote it," he smiled proudly. "Then you've just taken your mother's gift and made it your own." For the first time in years, Elena didn't feel like she was living in her mother's shadow. She felt like she was walking beside her, continuing what her mother had started, but in her own way. That night, she wrote a title at the top of the sheet. For her. It was simple, but it said everything she felt. Over time, Elena began playing more. At school, at small community events, even at the local cafe on weekends. Each time she grew more confident. Her name started to spread around town as the young pianist with the soft touch and soulful sound. But no matter where she played, she always remembered that the music wasn't just hers. It was a bridge between the past and the present, between her and the mother she still missed every day. And as she played under the glow of warm lights or quiet afternoons, people who listened could feel it too. The story behind every note, the emotion behind every pause. Elena had found her way back to the music she once ran from, and this time she wasn't afraid to let the world hear it. The days after the showcase felt like a dream for Elena. Every time she walked through the school halls, people smiled at her. Some even stopped to say how beautiful her music was. The principal called her to the office, not for trouble this time, but to congratulate her personally. It was the first time she had ever been there for something good. But despite all the kind words, Elena still felt unsure of what came next. The performance had opened something inside her, something powerful but also confusing. She loved the feeling of playing again, of sharing her music, but she was scared of what it might mean for her future. She didn't want to lose herself in the same way her mother had, constantly performing, always traveling, always chasing perfection. One evening, while she was practicing alone in the school's music room, Mr. Daniels walked in quietly. He waited until she finished before speaking. "You're improving faster than I expected," he said with a proud smile. Elena turned from the piano. "It's because of your help," he chuckled softly. "I only showed you the door. You're the one walking through it." She smiled faintly, brushing a bit of hair from her face. "I like playing again. I didn't think I would," he nodded. "Music has a way of coming back when you need it most." He paused, then said, "There's something I wanted to tell you. After your performance, a judge from the showcase reached out to me. They're hosting a state-level competition next month, and they'd like to see you play there." Elena blinked. "A competition?" "Yes," he said. "It's bigger than the last event, and the level of talent is much higher. But it's a great opportunity." Her heart raced. "I don't know if I can handle that." "You can," he said simply. "But you don't have to decide right now. Think about it." After he left, Elena sat at the piano, her fingers resting on the keys but not moving. The thought of playing in front of an even larger audience scared her. But there was also a quiet excitement beneath the fear. That night at dinner, she told her father about the invitation. He listened carefully, setting down his fork as she spoke. "Do you want to do it?" he asked. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "It's a big competition." "I've only just started playing again," he nodded slowly. "I know it's scary. But I also know that when you play, it's like you become someone else, someone stronger. I think you should try." She looked at him unsure. "What if I fail?" He smiled kindly. "Then you'll learn something. But if you don't try, you'll always wonder what could have happened." Those words stayed with her for days. By the end of the week, she told Mr. Daniels she would join the competition. He was thrilled and immediately started planning a new routine for her. "This time," he said, "we'll go beyond what you've done before. You've shown emotion, now let's show mastery." The next few weeks were intense. Elena spent every afternoon in the music room, practicing until her hands ached. Mr. Daniels taught her new techniques, and sometimes he'd just listen in silence, closing his eyes as she played. At home, her father noticed the difference too. The music filled their small house every evening, sometimes soft and delicate, sometimes strong and fierce. It reminded him of her mother, but it also reminded him that their daughter was growing into something all her own. One night, after a long practice, Elena sat on her bed staring at her old photo albums. In one picture, her mother was sitting at the piano with her, both smiling at the camera. She traced her mother's face with her finger. "I wish you could see me now," she whispered. The competition day came faster than expected. It was held in the city, in a large concert hall that could seat hundreds. As Elena and her father walked through the entrance, her heart pounded in her chest. Backstage, dozens of young performers waited, each dressed neatly, some carrying sheet music, others quietly rehearsing. She felt small among them. Mr. Daniels found her there and handed her a small piece of paper. "This is your order number. You'll be the 10th performer. Remember, just breathe. You've already done the hardest part, showing up." Elena nodded nervously. She sat quietly in a corner, closing her eyes to steady her breathing. When it was her turn, the announcer called her name, and she walked onto the stage. The grand piano stood under bright lights, gleaming like glass. The audience seemed endless, their faces hidden in the shadows. She sat down, placed her hands on the keys, and waited for the sound inside her to guide her. The piece she chose wasn't from any famous composer. It was the one she had written herself. For her. It felt right. It was her story, her way of saying everything words could not. The first notes echoed softly through the hall, fragile but clear. Slowly they grew stronger, weaving a melody that spoke of love, loss, and healing. The air in the room changed. The audience leaned in, drawn to the sincerity in her playing. Every note carried emotion, and every pause felt like a heartbeat. When she reached the final part of the piece, her eyes grew wet but her fingers never faltered. She played the last note with a soft touch, letting it fade naturally into the stillness. For a moment, the room was silent. Then applause filled the air, loud, thunderous, heartfelt. Some even stood up. Elena stood, bowed shyly, and walked off stage. Her hands were shaking, her heart pounding, but she felt lighter than ever. Mr. Daniels met her backstage, clapping his hands proudly. "You just played like someone who's been doing this her whole life," he said. Her father hugged her tightly. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "Your mother would be proud." Later that evening, the judges announced the results. Elena didn't win first place, but she earned a special award for outstanding emotional performance. At first, she felt a twinge of disappointment. But when she looked at the people clapping for her, smiling warmly, she realized it didn't matter. The music had reached them. That was the real victory. On the way home, her father looked at her with a gentle smile. "You didn't just play music tonight, Elena, you told a story." "That's what true musicians do," she smiled, resting her head against the car window. "It didn't feel like I was performing," she said softly. "It felt like I was home." The following week, life returned to its quiet rhythm, but something had changed inside her. She started teaching a few of her classmates who wanted to learn the piano. She helped them with small things, finger positions, timing, patience. She realized she loved sharing what she knew, watching others discover the joy she had once forgotten. Mr. Daniels often joked, "You're becoming my assistant now." She laughed, but a part of her liked the idea. One afternoon, as they cleaned up after class, he asked, "Have you ever thought about studying music after school? Maybe going to a conservatory?" Elena paused. "I don't know. That sounds big," he smiled. "You have the gift, and gifts like that shouldn't be hidden." That night, she thought about it for a long time. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to imagine it. Her music had once been a way to remember her mother. Now it was also a way to build her own life. She understood that her mother's dream wasn't for her to live in the past. It was to move forward, to keep the music alive. And that was exactly what she planned to do. Weeks later, the school hosted a small evening event called Voices of Talent, featuring students with different skills: singing, painting, dancing, poetry. Elena was invited to close the night with her piano piece. When her turn came, she walked to the piano, smiling as she sat down. The same faces that once looked at her with curiosity now watched her with admiration. As her fingers touched the keys, the hall filled with a familiar melody, gentle, warm, alive. The music spoke not just of sadness but of hope, of growth, of finding strength after pain. When she finished, the applause was long and heartfelt. But this time she didn't blush or look away. She lifted her head and smiled, feeling calm and free. Afterward, Mr. Daniels walked up to her and said softly, "You've become something special, Elena. You've turned your pain into beauty." She smiled. "I think my mother helped with that." He nodded. "I think she did too." As she packed her things that night, she looked at the piano one more time. It wasn't just an instrument anymore, it was her voice, her memory, her connection to everything that mattered. And though she didn't know where life would take her next, she knew one thing for certain: she would never stop playing. Years passed after that unforgettable night at the school's Voices of Talent event. Life moved forward, but the sound of piano keys never left Elena's world. What had once been a hidden gift, a memory buried in silence, had now become the center of her life. After graduating, she decided to study music education at the local university. It wasn't an easy choice. Many people told her to aim higher, to go to a big conservatory in the city. But she wanted to stay close to her father, and she believed music wasn't just about fame or big stages. For her, it was about connection, about touching hearts the way her mother had once touched hers. Her first few months at the university were challenging. She was surrounded by students who had been performing their entire lives, some already known for their talent. At times, she felt like she didn't belong. But every time she sat at the piano, that old calmness returned. She remembered the way her mother's hands had guided hers when she was little, and suddenly she felt brave again. She spent hours in the practice rooms, losing track of time as she played. Professors began to notice her dedication. One day, her piano instructor said, "You play like someone who's lived a lifetime inside every note." Elena smiled shyly. She didn't know how to explain it. It wasn't skill alone. It was emotion, memory, and love all mixed together. Back home, her father always waited to hear about her day. He still worked long hours, but every night he'd sit in his chair, listening to her play through the open window. He said it made the house feel alive again. One evening, after a long day of classes, Elena came home to find a letter in the mail. It was from her old high school. They were planning an anniversary celebration and wanted her to come back as a guest performer. She stared at the letter for a long moment, her heart fluttering. The same school where she had once refused to play. The same hall where her story had truly begun. When she told her father, he smiled proudly. "It looks like life wants you to finish the circle," he said. She laughed softly. "I guess it does." Over the next few weeks, Elena prepared for the event. She wanted to perform something special, something that would remind her of where she came from. She decided to compose a new piece, a mixture of her old emotions and everything she had learned since then. She titled it, "The Light Within." The music started softly, almost like a whisper, then grew stronger, flowing like a memory being reborn. Every part of it told a story: the pain of loss, the silence of grief, the rediscovery of joy, and finally, the peace that comes from acceptance. When the night of the event arrived, she walked into the same auditorium that had once terrified her. Everything looked smaller now, more familiar. The walls that had once echoed with nerves now felt warm with memories. Her old teacher, Mr. Daniels, was there waiting near the stage. His hair had a little more gray, but his smile hadn't changed. "I knew you'd come back one day," he said kindly. She hugged him. "I wouldn't have missed it." They talked for a while before the show began. He told her how proud he was, how her story had inspired many students after her. Some even joined the music program because of her. Hearing that made her eyes water. She never imagined that her quiet life could influence anyone. When it was finally her turn to play, she took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright just like before, but this time she wasn't scared. She felt calm, strong, and grateful. As she sat down at the piano, she looked out at the crowd. She saw familiar faces: her father, her old classmates, teachers who had watched her grow up. Then she began to play. The first notes floated gently through the room, delicate and warm. The melody carried traces of everything she had lived through: the loss of her mother, the fear she had once felt, the rediscovery of music, and the strength she found within herself. Every sound seemed to tell a part of her story. The audience was silent, completely still, as if they didn't want to miss a single note. When she reached the final part, her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. She ended with a soft, lingering chord that faded into the quiet. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the entire hall erupted into applause. People stood, clapping and cheering. Some had tears in their eyes. Mr. Daniels wiped his glasses, pretending not to be emotional, but everyone could see he was moved. Elena stood and bowed, smiling through her tears. She looked toward her father, who clapped the loudest of all, his eyes filled with pride. After the performance, many people came to speak with her. Old teachers, former classmates, even some new students. They thanked her for sharing her story through her music. One young girl shyly said, "I want to play piano just like you." Elena knelt down and smiled gently. "Then start now," she said. "Play for yourself first. The rest will follow." Later that night, when the hall had emptied and only a few people remained, she walked back to the piano one more time. She ran her fingers softly over the keys, remembering the first day she was forced to play here, back when she had wanted nothing more than to hide. It felt like a lifetime ago. Mr. Daniels walked up beside her. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. She nodded. "I wouldn't have if you hadn't pushed me back then." He smiled. "Sometimes the things we resist the most are the things we need the most." She looked at him with a soft smile. "You were right." Before leaving, she placed her hand gently on the piano lid and whispered, "Thank you." As she stepped outside, the night air was cool and calm. The stars above shone brightly, just like they used to when her mother was alive. She felt a strange comfort, as if her mother was still watching, still listening. On the ride home, her father looked at her with pride. "You've become everything your mother dreamed you would be," he said quietly. Elena smiled. "Maybe even more," he nodded. "You found your own light." She looked out the window at the passing lights of the town, her heart peaceful. Music wasn't just her talent anymore. It was her story, her way of living, her way of connecting to others. Over the next few years, she began teaching music full-time. She opened a small piano school in her town, naming it The Light Within, after the piece she had performed that night. Her students ranged from children who had never touched a piano to adults who thought it was too late to learn. She treated each of them with patience and kindness, just like her teachers once treated her. On the walls of her school hung pictures of her performances, her awards, and a framed photo of her mother smiling at the piano. Every morning, before her students arrived, she sat at her piano for a few quiet minutes and played a short melody. Sometimes it was her own composition, sometimes her mother's favorite tune. It was her way of saying good morning to the woman who started it all. Her life wasn't always perfect. There were still days when the world felt heavy, when she missed her mother deeply, or when her hands ached from too much practice. But she never forgot why she played. She played because music healed her. She played because it reminded her of love. She played because she wanted others to feel what she felt, the strength that comes when you let your heart speak through sound. And so, in that small town where everything began, the sound of piano keys could often be heard drifting through open windows. Soft, gentle, alive. Some said it was the sound of talent. Others said it was the sound of peace, but for Elena it was simply the sound of home.